Welcome, curious minds out there. Tonight I'm here with Mike Fiorito. What a wonderful name, and I'm pumped to have a nice talk with him about his book UFO Symphonic, Journey into Sound, and maybe also his book For All We Know. Mike, thank you for your time, and great to have you here today.
Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to get a note from you, and we've been having this kind of love fest dialogue, and it's just great to be so far away across the continent and to make such a great connection. So I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So, since we're talking about sounds today,
Yeah,
besides music, what is your favorite sound?
my favorite sound. That's a good question. Um, I like the sounds of prayer. I
Oh,
like the
really?
sounds of calming sounds. I love. There's a, a chapter in the book on Palestrina and how I had heard of Palestrina. So he was a Italian Renaissance composer, and he was using uh, uh, he was developing a new way to polyphonic voices. So prior to Palestrina in church music, which was Catholic church music, you had monophonic, just one voice.
Hmm.
And we know polyphonic because the Beatles sing polyphonic. You have three parts. Rock music, it's not uncommon to have different parts. You're actually singing different notes, and when the notes come together, they make a pleasing chord. And I discovered Palestrina. I was actually in a depressed state. I was going through separation from my first wife, and Palestrina really calmed me and grounded me.
Wow.
And now I listen to it. I'm not in that state anymore. Happily married a second time. I got it right the second time. And but I still am fond of that the soothing nature of it. It's like ocean waves,
Oh, yeah.
kind of the way it comes. I encourage. It's called the Mass of Pope Marcelli. So apparently, just a real quick thing, Daniel. So he was brought by, I think it was the Council of Ghent. I forget what it was. So he was brought to defend this polyphonic music because they said this is like crazy music. This is crazy making. It's satanic because it was against the church and it didn't originate in Rome, right? It came more from the north. Uh, it was kind of a Flemish and a northern influence. And at that time, any aesthetic, whether it be architecture or music that was not from Rome, was considered satanic and, ungodly. So he created this composition, the Mass for Pope Marcelli, and it was the apocryphal thing is that this was so beautiful that they permitted polyphonic music. I don't know if it's a fact, but it's a kind of a it's apocryphal. We're not sure if it's true.
Wow.
So
Very interesting
yeah,
answer, and thank you for the inspiration. I will have to look into that.
please.
Mine is not that philosophical. One of my favorite sounds ever is the PlayStation 2 startup sound. It brings me so much good
Cool.
memories and takes me back to when times were much more easy. And also
Yes.
the sound when you turned on your original Game Boy, it brings me back to better times. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting you say that. Brian Eno, the ambient composer, he created the sound for the windows when you used to turn on. I think it's
Oh,
different now, but it would be that bum bum bum, that sound. So yeah, and like you just said, so much of the how music it transports us. Because you mentioned that in your introduction on the YouTube you did introducing the book, it takes us somewhere, and it could be as simple as it takes you back in a memory, and it's very real. Takes you back. You might find yourself crying or remembering a deceased, family member, or it could be very profound. It's arresting, and it could be so. It could also take you out of yourself.
yeah.
I mean, in extreme ways that we'll probably discuss in this conversation, where
Yeah.
you're having a kind of paranormal experience, you're having an out-of-body experience.
Right.
Um, so
Like
it's quite a range, quite a range.
um, not a few years back, I had the chance to interview Eric Van Daniken,
Huh?
and sadly he passed uh,
Just recently, yeah.
on the 10th of January. And when I once asked Eric Van Daniken whether aliens might make or enjoy music, he replied, "Of course." And he said
Right.
something along those lines of everything is music and everything is frequency. Of course, everything that is alive has music. That's what he said. Um,
Yeah.
and it was an interesting answer. That answer seems to dissolve the idea of radical otherness altogether. And if that's
Hmm.
true, contact may not be about communication, but about resonance. That's were my thoughts when he said that.
Yeah. And other people have said that as well. Rudolf Steiner has written a lot about music, and that something to the effect that the universe is less of a machine than it is a song, and that resonance, the sounds of and beyond. So let's not say music, sound itself can be transportive, and that's what when we were discussing before. What I learned is I began this project as a musician, as someone deeply interested in music. I've done a lot of writing about music as a journalist. But what I discovered is that it's not just music, it's sound
Mhm.
that has that transportive quality. Sometimes it can be music. And what it does is it deliteralizes, it takes us out of ourselves. And where I was going before you started to hit the record button, is that we tend to live in the this narrow chamber of everyday reality. And that's not to knock it, because it's very important. It's very important that we're able to uh, do the job we have, take care of our children, be responsible, show up on time. I mean, that's very important. Unless we are so hip and cool that somebody else is taking care of everything for us, and that's probably not healthy anyway. It's important to be present. Uh, um, but when music or sound takes you out of yourself, it takes you into something. It's something, I'll say other, but that other may be some reflection of you, is as far as, and I'm not coming up with a grand theory. That's not what I'm more of a curious person that is examining this thing and is curious about it. I'm not proposing a grand theory, but by taking you out of yourself, what you realize is that you're connected to other beings. And I use the word beings because perhaps it's more than just human. It's an ecology of being, is what I like to use.
Yeah.
This kind of ocean of being that could include who knows what. I mean, what's interesting about, to I don't want to ping pong all over the place, but standard science, mainstream science is very focused on, the things we know, as it should be, because it's very hard to create paradigms and to test out things you just don't have enough data on, and you can't really prove true. And science is very effective. I mean, we've built great computers, we have super, conductors, we've sent spaceships to the moon, all of this with provable science. But we know that there's this moving target of reality. So we get little bits and pieces of it, but there's this other field that we only sometimes get glimpses into. And sound is a vehicle to knock you out of your everyday thinking into that larger field.
That's a great idea. That music or sound could be a frequency, a vehicle used for or a container for consciousness. That's an interesting idea or theory. But let's go back to something you said earlier. You talked about the universe, and I once talked with a friend. I talked about this idea that I had, and he said that's a childish idea to have, and he was making jokes about it. But I said, hey man, listen. You heard about that every planet in space has its own sound, its own frequency. You can go to YouTube and listen to all the different planets, all the sounds of all the different planets. Some are spooky, some are interesting, and every planet produces its own sound and frequency. I say, what if all these planets are positioned after a strict plan? Every planet is right where it needs to be, and all together they produce this melody that we can't hear, of course, but it works. It does its work. The melody that's created by all of these different planets does its work.
Music of the spheres.
Music of the spheres
is what it was called. Yeah,
and it creates all of this, all of the things we. Maybe all of these phenomena that we observe here on our planet. I mean, I think that's an interesting idea that it somehow does its work. This strange symphony of the planets. I don't know.
I mean, everything emits a sound. Everything. I mean, rocks emit a frequency.
Yes.
So you're absolutely on target. Everything has some kind of resonance. And as I said, I think before you were recording that the universe isn't so much a physical thing, but is more like a symphony, is more like a song, and it's loosely kind of dynamically connected, not this rigid kind of just structure. I mean, what we seem to see is that when we go to the as small as we can see, it's not so particles, it's like excitations. It's instances, it's energetic instances that are very dynamic. So, we can keep going down into the subatomic level, and first of all, you find a lot of space. You find a lot of space, and it's tricky. I find that interesting that when you get down to, like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and Schrodinger's observations, the quantum physicists, when they were looking at the phenomena, now I'm referring to the phenomenon of physical reality, that it's tricky. The observer influences the outcome. There's probability in, as opposed to the Newtonian concept of, I hit a table of billiard balls and I could use trigonometry to determine what is supposed to be. But in this new reality, it's probabilistic, and the observer influences the outcome, as if a mind is required to manifest, to collapse the wave, the particle wave. So that's kind of interesting that. Because I think we materialists, and what you're taught in school is that, consciousness is just a user illusion. It's don't hold on too much of it. Math is the important thing. Math and, the material reality is what is concrete and real. And I'm not saying that there's a tremendous virtue in all of that, but it's not the only thing. Math, everything is math. Right? But math isn't everything. And there's a big difference.
But music is math too in some way.
Yeah, sure.
Can also be very mathematical. And man, those are such interesting thoughts, and I tried to wrap my mind around it for a few days now, and and like I said earlier, it's similar to some ideas that I have. I think if everything is frequency, then human and all these phenomena are two systems that can only relate where resonance occurs. Like a radio. existence is not enough. Fine-tuning is required. Some
Mhm.
receivers are more sensitive than others. Some frequencies are harder to access. Yet tuning is not a one-way street. If the phenomenon seeks communication, it must also adjust itself within our perceptual structure. I don't know, in lack of better words. So, like
Yeah.
I've said earlier, what we call contact is therefore not a sudden appearance, but maybe a shared moment of aligned frequency, like
Mhm.
unstable but yet real. Yeah, those are thoughts that I had, and were thoughts that I had when
Yeah.
I was reading your book, which was very interesting. And I put a link in the info box for you guys out there. If you want to buy the book and read the book, please do so. It's very, very
Thank you.
interesting. Very interesting. But tell me more about the writing process, about your research, and what's used in the book.
I wanted to write this book, and you said in your, which I really appreciate all of what you said in the introduction video that you did, the short one, that these are narratives. So I didn't want to make this a scholarly. So there's a whole field of study, Daniel, that I did not know existed. It's called sound studies. I didn't know that there was such a thing. People get PhDs in sound studies, and you could study things like John Cage, and people can write their PhD thesis on what is silence, for example. I didn't want to write that kind of book. Mostly those books are actually very hard to read. They're for the specialist. So I wanted to, and I didn't even know that field existed. I kind of bumped into it as I was doing, actually towards the end of the book, really. So the process was I wanted to tell stories, and I wanted to be like a field researcher. So you saw from the book that I went out to places to experience a sound bath, for example. So I went out. There's a place in New York City that uh, it's a studio. It's like a kind of a yoga center, a meditation center, and they use sound bowls. And he has a whole uh, bunch of percussion type instruments and devices, sound bowls, chimes, bells. It's extremely effective. And you could walk in there thinking, well, this is BS, this is just nonsense, this stuff. But once I remember I went to the studio in New York City. It's always so busy. Everything is so busy. Like getting to the subway can be an adventure in itself. Then you're on the subway. That's its own adventure. And I got to the studio late, and I was kind of I was huffing like, ah, ah, get out of the way. I want to go meditate. um, when I get to the place, I'm sort of I'm breathing heavy. I'm a little excited from the trip getting there. I lie down, and then he introduces the session, and it's this kind of calming, uh, you to use breathing to calm yourself down. And I'm thinking, I'm never going to get calm because I'm too excited. And then once the sound bath started to come, and he uses like bowls. So you have things like I have a bowl here. You can't, but he has these. There are many of them, and uh, you feel those sounds washing over you, and before you know it, you go into a kind of hypnagogic state where it's that pre-dream state.
Mm-hmm.
So you have these incoherent ideas that are kind of nonsensical. It's before you go into a dream narrative, because it seems that when you transition over into before you dream, there's that period where you're having, you know what I mean. I'm sure everybody has this. You have like elephant standing, bicycle, movies, telephone. It just doesn't make sense. It's this collage of things that your mind is free associating. But the way the human mind works, it creates a narrative out of that. somehow. So when you go into these hypnagogic states, and then you have encounters with selves, with beings, you have conversations. I found. So you have things emerging, and they have emotional quality. You just have this like voices come out of something. I had this kind of this old lady, kind of like what we would call a strega, she's sort of like a witch kind of thing, just pop out of into my mind, and I'm having an argument with her, kind of not an argument, but just disagreement. I'm thinking, this is just a projection of me, right? Is that just me? So that was just one example. I experienced the profound reality of that, and I went to other places to explore. I did Gong yoga. So there's this uh, person that I met that introduced me to someone who does Gong yoga. So using gongs to, in a similar way, to create a state of mind, and the gongs have different frequencies, and there's this whole like astrological element to it as well. So certain gongs are used on certain days, and according to astrological uh, detail. And again, it's very similar. You have this kind of this transportive quality where you're taken somewhere, and what you realize is, and that's why I say it's not just about you. It's about this. It dissolves the boundary. It dissolves your boundaries, and you're experiencing an ecology of being, something that's other than you, something that's bigger than you. I had mentioned, I think we weren't recording at the time, that and I feel like these little excursions are important. So I keep a dream book, a dream journal.
Mhm.
And what I said to you is that in my dream journal, I read my dream journal, and it reads like fairy tales. And they read, I can't believe I write them I scribble them down. Basically, I have to get up, I'm having a dream, I have to get up to pee. So I get up to pee, I write my dream down. This is the system I use, right? I recommend it. And when I read the dreams, they're perfectly written because I didn't write them. I'm the scribe taking the notes. And what I realize is I'm dipping into this ecology of being, this greater, bigger realm. There are other things too. So as you saw in the book, I asked people a simple question. So I had some of my narratives because that was important for me to carry the book. I'm the writer, but I interviewed people. So and I said, tell me something that relates sound to the phenomenon, and I left it wide open. And you saw from the stories, it wasn't the same story repeated over and over again. In one instance, James Iandoli, who has a podcast called Engaging the Phenomenon, great guy too. Um, he had an experience where he was he was in this he was having these anomalous feelings, these anomalous, strange um, things that occurred prior to what would follow. That is often the case, that people have this breakdown feeling before a larger, let's say, UFO or an experience of the phenomenon. It's kind of like you're entering dream, and you saw in the book I connect dream to the phenomenon. They're very much connected. And he said that he was driving somewhere and he saw this kind of this orange kind of plasmatic looking thing in the sky, and he started to follow it, and he followed it, but it went behind buildings. So you can't just drive through buildings. You just kept driving, and he actually at some point he got into a car accident. And he said because he was working late nights and he was exhausted, and he got into a car accident at a different time than when he saw the plasmatic ball of light. So this occurred in the same place, but a different time. interesting, right?
Mm.
What he said is he went into this kind of near-death experience where he was out of his body and he was experiencing this great illumination. And he had this experience of interconnectedness, of oneness. And even though he'd just been in an accident, that everything was going to be all right. And he heard emerging out of this beautiful, incredible symphony of like this angelic choir. And he's not the only one. So James, he gave that example. There are other people that have similar kinds of experiences. What's his name? Orfeo and Angelico. I forget his name. He wrote a book that I came upon his work through Jung, C.G. Jung, who wrote about this American who had a similar experience where he saw, and I do write about it in the book. He saw a craft. He went aboard the craft, and in a similar fashion, people have this experience. He went aboard this craft that was, just, the size of a bathroom or something. But when he went inside, it was this
Yeah.
gigantic, like cathedral. So space and time break down. And then he heard this lush, incredible, and symphonic music. Those stories are similar, right? But many of the stories, I would say, the stories that I captured, there were really no repeats. Many of the stories had to do with grief. They had to do with loss. Yeah, you had a
No,
question.
no. I was just thinking. It's very interesting that you said a lot of stories had to do with grief. Grief is
Yeah,
a very powerful emotion, just like hate and
yeah.
love.
Hmm.
And I think some people would disagree, but I say hate is a much more powerful emotion than love.
Yeah.
People disagree with
Ho-
me when I say that, but that's my opinion. Um, but yeah, I can uh, I can understand where you're coming from with that. And but before we too far away from one topic I was interested in, it's your dream journal that you spoke about. It's very interesting what you said about the dream journal. You wrote it down and you didn't even have to think about it a lot. I talked to this guy here in Germany. I know him very well. His name is Bernhard Reicher, and he's a magician, but not the typical magician. It's much more complicated.
Right.
Not too easy to put it in a sentence here now. But I've had a podcast with him, and we talked about what he calls the imaginable world, which is, in his opinion, a world that is already there.
Hmm.
And there are all these stories people write down are there. They already exist. And you just
Hmm.
connect to this imaginable world somehow
Hmm.
through whatever, maybe music or whatever. You connect to this imaginable. And I used to write myself. I used to write short stories, like
Hmm.
short horror stories. And sometimes during the writing process, I I was writing for 3 or 4 hours straight without a break, and suddenly, boom, snap, it was gone. There was nothing. It was
Hmm.
cut off. I was cut off and I couldn't get. I could not get one idea out of my
Mm.
head. It was as if somebody cut the line. And that's interesting. And
Yeah.
this is why I think there could be something like this imaginable world where everything is already there. You just have to find a way to connect to this imaginable world. I remember the guy, I forget the name all the time. Who's the guy who wrote Lord of the Rings?
Tolkien.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think he also
Yeah.
said everything was there. I just had to write it down. It was not that I thought about it a lot. I just wrote it down.
Right. Well, I think often, you said a lot of interesting things there. So there is this word called the imaginal. And Jung felt that when you imagine things, they're real. That's what he felt. I mean, and if you think about it, look around where you're sitting right now, right? You have a lamp. I have a desk. I have a desk that I can lift up. I have pictures. I have a book. I have a notebook. These are things that someone imagined and that were made real in the world. So the imaginal, but what Jung felt, and there's a philosopher, Henry Corbin, that he felt that the things that are thought kind of go out into the world. And I write about this more in, I'm working on a book. I'm actually finished with the book. It's now in the kind of editing stages. How, the as we think things, we loose them out into the world. In Buddhism, there's this notion of the tulpa. So you can create beings from thinking. And sometimes people have created beings from thinking and they couldn't get rid of them. They basically became pesky nuisance. This thing that popped out of from your imagination. And that's not to deprecate saying imagination meaning less real.
Right.
And I think that's when we imagine the world, we are creating the world. We co-create the world. It's not like the world is, I don't believe the world is out there and we come to it. It is this coming together where we create the world and we make the world. It's not like one way, and we discover it.
That's very interesting. And we come back to where we stopped a minute ago. In a minute, we stopped when you said a lot of stories have to do with grief. But before we come to that, I had an out-of-body experience, and I have to say, a few months back, and I have to say, I'm very skeptical. I was always very skeptical when it comes to all this. I was very skeptical. I'm still very skeptical. And
sure.
I don't know what this was about, but I achieved it with the help of binaural beats. I was experimenting with binaural beats, and I did that for a good amount of time, maybe a year or longer. Nothing happened, and suddenly it happened. But it happened at a time where I was calming down. I had a break from the podcast, and my head was free again at last, and I could breathe, and I had a lot of free time, and wasn't thinking about the podcast, wasn't thinking about work, and maybe that's why it suddenly happened. I was laying in my bed and had these binaural beats on my headphones. And suddenly, my whole body was vibrating. Everything was vibrating. And I heard this humming sound, like very loud, like a generator or something like that. And suddenly, I had the feeling I was something's lifting me up. It was just as people describe it, like textbook. And it was very interesting. And after one or two failed attempts, I suddenly let it happen. First I was scared, and then I let it happen. And it was interesting. And to keep it short, I think I saw a whole different world. I was at a place that felt as real as this place here, where I'm sitting right now. I swear when I was there, everything was as real as where I am right now. And this is why I believe there are two worlds. And the other world is as real as this one.
Yeah.
I can't prove it, of course, and I don't know, maybe it still was a dream, I don't know, but I don't think so. I think there is another world somewhere. And sometimes we're there for some reason, sometimes we're not.
And some people feel that the other world is hyper real. It's more real than the world, your everyday world, your everyday experience.
Is it because? Sorry to interrupt you. Sorry.
Yeah.
Is it
please.
because people? Just to add this to your comment, is it because I heard from people talking about OBEs, they say the colors are more vibrant and everything is, I don't know how to put it in words, clearer maybe.
Yeah, your perceptions.
Yeah.
I think there's when you were, so I write about binaural beats, by the way, as well. in UFO Symphonic that people use, and I also, so I was the experiment. I made myself the experiment, and they're very effective. So in binaural beats, you have two frequencies that are occurring, but they're different frequencies, and they create this like warble effect, and it kind of takes you out of your everyday reality. I think that's the key thing here. When you said vibrant colors, it reminds you of people that are having, say, a spiritual relevant revelation experience, or maybe a psychedelic experience, something that took you, or a dream experience. And I think these are kind of connected. These are all connected. That using binaural beats, maybe it's in a state of grief. Maybe you were in a car accident. Maybe you were in, when people have near-death experiences, they have extraordinary um, encounters with the dead, with a deceased family member or other. But the thing is that you're taken out of your everyday, and it's like you're loosed upon the world, and you have more access to consciousness, I would say being. I keep coming back to this notion of ecology of being. You have this extraordinary sense of something larger. And it brings us to that notion of interconnectedness. And I want to go back a little bit to, if it's okay, we were talking about Buddhism. I began to talk about Buddhism. And it's funny because you use the word hate, how hate or anger is very powerful. I wrote it down. And it's very interesting because we often can find ourselves in this kind of angry state. Anger is a very palpable, powerful thing. And if you've ever noticed, when you're pissed off, man, you are clear. You have such clarity. And it's an enticing state. It's alluring. Everyone's happiness, I think it was Tolstoy said, every family's happiness is the same. It's their tragedies that make them different. The tragedy is what makes your family story different. But just to get back to that, we affix ourselves to these stories in our head. Who am I? I am this. I'm this. Look at me. I do this. I'm this kind of. Look at him. He isn't all of that. He's. We do these. Someone annoys us, and we run through ourselves these little stories we tell ourselves. And in Buddhism, you're you're training to take a step back from those stories, because what you realize is those stories are mostly bullshit, first of all, and they're little hamster wheels that you get caught on that basically are pointless. Take a step back, and look at yourself as watch yourself doing that. And in a sense, that's kind of when people practice meditation, and when they practice these states, you can go very far with that. You can achieve incredible states of being, of consciousness. Um, Devotees of Tibetan Buddhism, after spending time like in a cave, you spend a year in a cave, right? What happens is you start to conjure reality in your mind, because that's just how we're storytellers. We weave stories. But what you realize is that story I'm conjuring in my mind when I'm sitting in the cave. By the way, I'd be terrified doing that because I'm so claustrophobic.
Me too.
But but it what they realize is that story that we tell ourselves in our everyday reality is just as delusional. So not to say that, I'm a father, I have two kids, I love my kids, I work, I'm a hardworking person, I'm committed to the world I'm in, very much committed. I'm certainly not above it, but to have some distance, to not be so fixed to we grip onto our notions of truth and reality. And where I'm going with this is through some practices. Maybe they're accidental, or maybe they're intentional. Oftentimes people who have an accident, they get into a car accident or something happens, they go into the hospital because their kidney failed. They have profound experiences and that changes them. And they realize that I I don't have to grip onto this narrow band of reality, this narrow narrative that I tell myself. And that narrative, it's my narrative. Then there's an our narrative. Then there's like a, how we view the world narrative. Then there's a from a national level. Don't be so affixed and attached to these things of what I am and who we are. Um, have some distance with that and see it for what it is what I'm saying. When we people who in my book, people who have experiences with grief, it's funny how it can manifest through the phenomena manifested through in one story through an instrument. So a friend of mine told me a story uh, about he very much in love with his partner. I don't think they had gotten married. My friend Frank, and she was a violinist, very talented musician, a fiddle player, and she played a lot of instruments. She played flutes and various instruments, and he had a flute that she died of cancer young,
Mm.
and another friend was at his house, someone whom I've written about. He's a pretty famous musician in the States and really around the world, Peter Rowan. He's a bluegrass musician. And he was at my friend Frank's house and he sees this flute. He sees a box sitting in his shelf, Peter. And he says, Frank, what's that over there? It's this very fancy looking box. Frank says, oh, that's Sue's flute. It doesn't play. Peter takes the box. He says, may I look at this? And while they're speaking, Peter assembles the flute. And they're having this conversation, so Frank isn't even thinking. And Peter plays a song on the flute, a flute that doesn't play, right? And then they compose a song together, which was this magical experience. And Frank is just caught up in the magic of this moment of writing a song with a music legend, Peter Rowan. And then the excitement of all this kind of dies down. Peter puts the flute down. Conversation changes. Later, Peter goes to pick the flute up again, and he can't play it. It won't play. It's a flat. There's no note comes out of it.
Yeah.
And they kind of look at each other. I don't even think at that moment they had that realization of how profound that was. But somehow through what was that? What was it? Did something blow through? I mean, you could explain it away in some physics manner, perhaps, but it just was extraordinary for that moment in that time that through grief that that this flute came to life. I don't have an explanation, and you could explain it away with something um, uh, prosaic, that whatever. But to me, that was very profound.
It was a phenomena in itself. And
Yeah,
that he
yeah,
was able to play the flute, and that shows me, especially in the combination with grief, how sometimes the phenomena and music, the phenomena in combination with the music, can be very beautiful, and it can be also very insidious,
sure,
especially when it
sure.
comes to music and grief. So somebody is grieving and plays this beautiful or very sad melody, so he shares his sadness, his bad feelings with the audience, with us listeners, makes us also sad,
Mm,
and takes a little bit of sadness from the guy playing the instrument. So he sets
mm.
himself free from his sadness through his music, but puts a little bit of sadness in all our hearts. That's, like I said, sometimes music and the phenomenon can be a little bit insidious too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's trickster,
it's a trickster.
and I, that's why I think it's important to say we live in our everyday reality, that narrow band, and it's safe. And I'm not mocking that. I like to feel equilibrium and everydayness and predictability. We all like that. And when we poke at the phenomena, it pokes us back. It has this way of kind of laughing at us and teasing us and to say, "Ha, you think you got this right." Um, and it can be dangerous, frankly. I mean, how far do you want to take it? How far can you take it? So people devotees of Tibetan Buddhism, for example, they'll go to charnel grounds. So they'll take people to a place where someone has recently died, let's say. So it's a cemetery. And it's scary, and you go and you stay at night in the cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
And with the idea, and maybe there was some murder or some kind of mischief behind all of this as well. And you're confronting your own mortality. And, how far can you take that? Because I probably would be pretty scared.
Yeah.
But it's sort of a test of, remember, I went back to this notion of narratives, of stories. And so we're constantly attaching to these smaller stories of who we are. And that's the ultimate test. You're in a cemetery, there's this ghoulish, feeling of death in the air, and you're supposed to rise above it. You're supposed to manage that psychological state. And some might say that it's more than a psychological state, that there is some resonance of being that's happening in that moment. So when you open up that Pandora's box, it's be ready for what's to come. And
yeah,
it could get tricky.
It is. I have a friend who is a UFO researcher, and he builds this fancy camera setups, very clever camera setups with AI and little computers and stuff like that, and very cool camera systems. He builds them by himself, and he puts them in different spots, and sometimes he goes to UFO hotspots and puts them there, but he barely catches something. And we discussed it, and I think sometimes the phenomena it just knows when it is observed. The phenomena knows when you want to observe it. They know it. They sense the cameras. They sense your intentions, and they know you want to observe it. And sometimes it wants to be seen, and you see something on your camera, maybe a little glimpse or a little orb or maybe a UFO or whatever, or a being. And sometimes it just wants to play with us a little bit, like we talked about. It wants to trick us a little bit. And sometimes it doesn't want to be seen. And sometimes, in some cases, when people have apparitions or close encounters, stuff like that, or talking about they've been inside a UFO and stuff like that, like you spoke about earlier, when people go in really small vessels and suddenly in the inside everything is very big. Maybe that's the cases when the phenomena wants to tell us something. I don't know what. I don't know what. It's strange to observe that often these phenomena talk about stuff here on Earth. They talk about nuclear power is not good, and you destroy the planet and this and that. They always talk about stuff like that. They always seem to care about us. And this is why I think the phenomena stems from here, from Earth. Maybe it's an expression of Earth's consciousness. Maybe the Earth is conscious, like a living being, and this is Earth's way to communicate with us, try to tell us something, because it's the only way to tell us something through phenomena, through different phenomena, because it's the only way for it to get in contact with us, to get in contact with our consciousness, and to make itself known. Maybe Earth tried different, like through earthquakes, through catastrophes and stuff like that, but we don't get it. We just don't get it. But or we get it, but we don't want to behave different. Yeah, but maybe sometimes I think Earth is conscious, and this is like I
Yeah.
said, a way to get in contact with us.
Yeah, I agree. It's a kind of a wake-up call. Is it Navajo? Dine is another way to say that. The word for mind is land.
Oh,
So in Navajo, the word for mind is land. And I've done a lot of reading. I did a series of interviews with indigenous um, artists and uh, indigenous chiefs, American indigenous uh, from various tribes. And it's very interesting. And then I did reading because I needed to learn more about it. So when I'm speaking to people, I have a respectful understanding. Um, they have a different relationship with the earth, and I think we are catching up with this. That rivers have sovereignty, that oceans have sovereignty. We are connected to nature, and I think what you're saying is very very much on point. That the phenomenon, it's kind of like in medieval literature. Someone sees a deer, right, and then the deer looks back at you, and then you go chase the deer into the forest, and now you're aloft on an adventure, right? And in a similar way, the phenomena is a kind of a wake-up call. Interesting that Buddha means awake. So to awake, because we're constantly, as I said, we're falling asleep. We're going into our little narratives, and it's trying to wake us into a bigger state. Hello, wake up, wake up. Listen to the birds. You're looking for intelligent species out here. There's intelligent species right here. It's happening right here and now. This incredible planet that we live on. I think I write about in UFO Symphonic about them, and I write about it in For All We Know. For sure, it's funny. You said I can't always remember what you wrote. I read it very fast. Sometimes I can't remember what I wrote, because I move on. Um, but this notion of the interconnectedness in nature. I am nature. I am a manifestation of the energy of the sun. I eat the foods that were made by the sunlight, whether it animal or plant. And someday I will be returned back to the soil to be a part of that. And my constituent parts will break down and be disseminated, and reconstituted. We are a part of nature. We forget that. And it's interesting that you say, and I've heard it said before, that the phenomenon it's a warning to us. It's sort of saying, there's more important stuff than you're trying to destroy each other. You're so ego driven. You're so bloated with your sense of power, humanity, um, that you're missing the opportunity to discover the power of nature and uh, the importance of connecting with the natural world, that we are a part of it, because we feel disconnected from it. It's out there, we are here. In moments of revelation, people have what was it, when the from outer space, someone saw the earth from outer space,
mm-hmm.
and astronaut, and had this moment of revelation that this on this tiny blue dot, every war that ever happened, every being, every creature, every love, every death and birth, it all happened on that tiny blue dot. And this sense of where we're fighting over petty differences. And the notion of Gaia. So James Lovelock came up with this notion, and he was laughed at. Gaia, this notion that the earth is a being, what you just said. And he was laughed at. And what we now are coming to the understanding, there were other people like him at that time. Lynn Margulis, who was Carl Sagan's first wife, she came up with this notion of coevolution. So coevolution is this idea that species evolve in an ecosystem together. So like the insects, that are in that soil, that excrete some chemical that breaks down this thing that makes this plant edible to these animals, that facilitate the growth of these trees in this mycorrhizal loom of, fungus that's on the ground. that this is all connected, and evolution doesn't happen in silos, it happens in dynamically together. She was laughed at. She was, oh, this is hippie, bullshit. And now we realize that this is more true. And as we study indigenous ways of looking at the world, we realize what may seem counterintuitive, what may seem non-scientific, actually has more integrity and has uh, longer term truth to it and importance. So there's a saying that 7 generations. It's the Haudenosaunee. I think it's the Native American peoples. The actions that I do I should think about their consequences 7 generations hence. And it's pretty profound because we're so limited. We think, what's me, me, me? What's in it for me, me, me?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to, when I throw this litter on this garbage on the street, or I do this action, I mean, good intentions could lead to horrible things too.
Yeah.
But to have some consciousness of trying to be conscious of the interconnectedness of how my behavior, because our behavior does have impact. And there are things that we can do directly. We can be kinder. We could be kinder. We could be nicer. We could be more giving. We could be more generous. Which kind of, that's sort of universal religion, notions of religion. To love thy neighbor as you would yourself. That the UFO, as far as I'm concerned, I love the UFO. I love science fiction. I love the technology of traveling at 1,000,000 miles a second. But the UFO is, in my feeling, is not the end of the story. It's a wake-up call. It's the phenomenon manifesting to excite your imagination in some way. It's connecting you with you in a way that it feels that you'll comprehend it.
You said a lot of interesting stuff, and when we talk about if Earth is conscious and is a living being, I sometimes think if the little beings on our body, the mites and whatever is crawling around on our body, if they were conscious, they would also view us as their planet, in quotes.
Right.
And yeah, the same way we could be the mites living on Earth.
Sure.
And so on and so on. And Earth could also be a very small attachment to the universe as we view it. And the universe could also be just a very small attachment to something bigger, and so on, and so on, and so on. It's a never-ending story. So it's all connected, and it's all one. And that's very interesting to think about.
Yeah. What you said, it's interesting that there's more fungus and biota that is not you than there is you. Google it. There's less of your DNA in your body than there is of other biota. You're a host. We're hosts for creatures that are feeding upon us.
Yeah.
And also giving. There's a kind of give and take system. There's an expression, turtles all the way down. I love that expression. So you go all the way down. It's like turtles, all the way up. And like this image that you said, in both directions. And
I don't want to get too deep into spirituality, but do you think because I like the idea. I don't know if it's like that, but I like the idea that this body here that we are in is just a vessel for our consciousness, and consciousness is, I don't know where, somewhere else. I believe in collective consciousness, for example. I think that's a possibility, that there's a collective consciousness somewhere.
Or another way to call it is ecology of being. So that's this is what there's Terence McKenna. Do you know Terence McKenna? He was a philosopher, kind of psychedelic, advocate of psychedelics, an extraordinary thinker. I highly encourage anyone to go out and read his work. He used the term ecology of souls. And a good friend of mine, Josh Cutchin, who wrote the introduction to UFO Symphonic, he wrote the foreword, I should say. Josh is a kind of expert on folklore, and he goes around the country here talking about folklore and the UFO phenomena. He used the term, he has a book called The Ecology of Souls. And so I'm kind of riffing off of that ecology of being, that it's collective unconscious. It's this, because I think that the UFO phenomena and phenomena in general are echoes of consciousness. And I'm not saying that to deprecate the experiences that people have, but they're echoes of it's our consciousness acting in a way we don't completely understand. That the other is kind of us. We are the other. Or as Frank Zappa would say, we are the other people. We are the other people. You're the other people too. We are the other people. I think there's the way Frank Zappa was saying that in a joking way. And it's funny because the song is called Mother People.
Oh.
So Frank Zappa, because it's Mothers of Invention. So if you look up the song, it's called Mother People. But what he says is, we are the other people. We are the other people. And and when I'm in my best moments, I have that understanding, and I connect with that. I'm okay to talk about spiritual stuff. I'm not adverse to that. But at the same time, I certainly don't put it on anyone. I think being awoken to the notion that there's more out there, what that should do, ideally, I would think, is humble us and take us out of our state of ego masturbation, where we're sort of lavishing in the greatness of ourselves or whatever.
Yeah.
And to become more, in the service of other people, which I love taking care of my family. I annoy my son because I'm like wanting to cook for him and to, it's like I'm his butler. I'm his like private butler. He'll realize someday that this is he was lucky to have that. And I think when you're in service to people, like the work you do, you read people's books, you give them a platform. It's elevating to you. It's actually, when you give, you get a lot in giving. You get yourself out of yourself. You get yourself out of the way.
Especially when you realize it's good to give, but to not expect anything back. For example, I heard people my age, friends, they say, I did so much for my kids, and now they do this and do that, and they don't. Your kids don't owe you nothing, man.
Right.
They didn't ask to be here.
And right.
Everything that you do for them is your duty. You have to do it for them because you are responsible that these little buggers are here, and they owe you nothing. Your kids don't owe you nothing. All the money you put into their, into everything you do for them, even if it's sports or school and everything, they owe you nothing back. And
it's a long game.
It's a long game.
As I see it, it's the long game. So, what I don't expect when you're in, part of growth is understanding the interconnectedness, and to give, and to humility. It's very hard to do that. But I do think what you put in is what you get out. But that takes time. It takes time for a person to. I know when I was 14, I could give a shit about anything. I mean,
right.
It took me a long time to. And my family teases me because my mother would make all of us do house chores. What I would do is turn the vacuum on and then go do something else. So, and then I was caught doing that. Now I'm the vacuum madman because I'm not even vacuuming the house. I'm vacuuming like my soul. It's really this is an advocation. I'm doing something. So kind of funny. We've gotten so way off topic, but I also feel like not at all. This is all constellating around this discussion. It's a huge discussion.
Yeah, I think so too. Because this is a huge discussion, and my thoughts are everywhere right now. I would like to put a stop to this episode right here, and I would love to meet you again for another episode, because I have so much more thoughts, but I have the feeling I have to.
We're free falling here.
Yeah.
Which is cool. And yes, I have another book coming out, and we can talk about that. I'd send you. We're still in the final stages of wrapping up the edits and this kind of thing. But once it's complete, I'll be happy to send it to you, and it should be coming out within the next few months. And it's also very music focused. But we'll talk about that another time. But just to say, Daniel, what a great privilege to spend time with you. I really mean that, and it's magical that you just plucked me, out of the universe here, and we made this great connection across a gigantic ocean. And what a privilege to be able to make that connection.
Well, thank you. Same. Also very thankful that you took the time to talk to me. You inspired me a lot. Your book inspired me a lot, and I'm going to read your other book as well, of course. And I'm looking forward for the next book and the next talk, of course. But before we wrap it up, please let people know where they can find you online if you want to be found, and where they can find your books and stuff.
Yeah, everything is is on my website. If you go to mikefiorito.com, that's MikeFiorito.com, and you can look at all the books I've written. You could, any kind of information. You could make contact as well if you have questions or whatever, and I look forward to it.
Awesome. Okay, let's wrap it up for today. Please stay with me for 2 more minutes, okay?
I'll be here. Thank you. Thank you all for listening.